Hello and welcome to the first episode of our Country Story People podcast. I'm your host David Salomon, Sal for short. Today I'm speaking with John Hartley, an accomplished artist, musician, cultural statesman and advocate for the Gooberi-Warri of the Mossman area, his hometown in North Queensland. We'll be talking about the inspiration leading up to an exhibition in a couple of months. It all started years ago, travelling with senior men singing up country. As they made their way from the APY lands to Utopia, over 700 kilometres away, the songs they sang were timeless. They resonated in John with an enduring sense of the vitality of the land. John got thinking about how the songs, stories and dances of his home country might be revitalised. The results will be showcased in an upcoming exhibition entitled Country Story People. So sit back, relax and listen in as John and I discuss this exciting new project.
My name is Garanjal John Hartley. I belong to the Googeri language group in far north Queensland. I'm a member of the Gooberi or the Gooberi clan in Mossman. Our clan estate encompasses Port Douglas Mossman area in far north Queensland. I'm currently chairperson for the Gooberi Aboriginal Corporation. Well, I think I was always coming back to Mossman. In excess of nearly 60 years I've travelled back and forth from wherever I've been to Mossman. Lived up here on a few occasions during my time, and I moved up here with my mother, who was born and raised here in Mossman, down at around the Mossman Gorge, and brought her home, so to speak. What was occurring at the time when I came here were matters in regards to lands transfers and native title. So lands transfer are lands that were held or are held by the Queensland government. And part of their brief is to hand those lands back to traditional owners, which is somewhat separate from the native title and Mabo in particular. So those kinds of issues were rumbling around at that stage. Yeah.
So John, Just asking about your work, can you give us a bit of an idea of what you've been doing? It's a pretty long list now.
Well, I've always been involved to some degree in regards to language, particularly the Googeri language and the maintenance and continuation of our language, and not just the language as a spoken word, but also how it relates to song, dance and ceremony and things of that nature. I guess central to all that is the values, beliefs, practices and worldview of First Nations people. I think that's really where I attempt to centre myself around those areas. I know that the reigniting, rekindling of language, of song, of dance, of story are a vital antidote to the issues that confront First Nations people daily. So I try and keep focused on those things. Land, of course, or country, Bubble, is central to all of that. Central to those things I mentioned briefly is country, story and people.
John, I first met you in Adelaide. I was doing some filmmaking here. A Cree woman, Vicky Whalen, come to Adelaide on an exchange program. And we'll be talking more about that perhaps in a later episode. So a couple of years ago, you were involved in a community language group. Can you tell us about that?
It's now called the Kuku Language and Culture Advisory Group. You know, because those the values and beliefs and indeed the practices, indeed the way of life of Burma are all embedded in the language, you know. You can't really share language without those other components being inherently embedded within the language itself. You know. Of course, I'm more or less an observer in the process. A number of people, some elders and community members, got together with the local school and decided to develop a language curriculum within the school, starting off with the younger pupils. I think that could be 4 or 5 years ago, I think, David. But that is still going, ongoing. It's going from strength to strength. It's embedded now within the curriculum of the Mossman State School, and books and stories now are being produced that are approachable for the younger students, you know, and being transferred into language, you know, as well. Of course, we've done a book on a major story up here, which is also included in the library now. We're developing those resources, or the initiative itself has been widely recognised throughout the state of Queensland and is often sought out by other schools within North Queensland and afar as well, about how it's developed, what's in the curriculum and how it's presented and things like that. Yeah, we're very fortunate to have that. The language teachers themselves, they're Kuku Yalanji, so we're very fortunate to have those, but also the teaching staff we work together with, you know. It's a very successful program, yeah.
So one of the reasons we're talking together now is because of another project that you've got going that actually culminates in at the end of this financial year.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Walonku Barin Badi Bubuku Singing Country Project.
Singing Country, yes.
Can you tell us about that?
I think it had its beginnings some years before, in my mind anyway. You know, it's always been there, but having had a very, I guess, powerful, for want of a better word, experience travelling through country with a number of elders from the APY lands. We're going from APY lands heading to Utopia, which is a little bit of a drive. But these old fellas, we started in the APY land and just kept singing and pointing out areas where the songs and the stories related to. And the sense of that when you we maybe had one or two more people in the troopy than we should have had, but nonetheless. But when you're travelling along like that, and that's happening, it's like everything around you when you look out to country takes on a new perspective, not perspective, but a new way of looking at country and listening to country. And in fact, when you look out, for me, it looks like everything is sort of just standing up and vibrant and alive, which it is, of course. But so from that experience, the Singing Country project has been developed out of that. And the Singing Country project is about, again, re-establishing songs and stories as they relate to our country here in North Queensland. So it was about collecting those stories again, developing songs from those stories, and then, of course, dances from those songs. So that we have song, dance, and story all again back into one place and directly relating to where particular areas of country where those stories sit or run. That's the, I guess, the central theme of the project. Of course, there's also the exhibition side where we'll be presenting the material, culture and cultural tools relative to the Mossman Port Douglas area during NAIDOC or July, where the project will culminate. What will happen then is those some of those songs will be presented, and dances will be presented at the opening night of that exhibition. Other songs and dances will go to part of the project is developing a digital tour of our country, which depicts areas, story names, story places of country, and you'll be able to click on a particular area and hear the song, see the dance, and read the story, all translated in Google Yanji. So I think we have several stories now that have all been translated back into Google. Some of them are quite big, and there's about 13 songs that have been developed now. And those songs are general information. We don't in any way pretend that they are ceremonial or sacred songs. But what they do is, if you come across the Gurangi, which is a cassowary story, then that song will tell you the direction that old fellow went and who he went to visit, why he didn't stay there, and why he returned back to his rainforest country, and things like that. The idea being that our young, growing into these things in the future, will see that story place and know how to talk that story, sing that story, dance that story, and continue to ponder and understand the story. So that story then will always remain neatly packaged in the country,
So your young people, particularly at the school, are now getting a rich cultural experience through language, and hasn't been there for a long time, eh? It's always been in the community.
Yes.
And we're surprised to find out how many young people were actually able to speak Google at the beginning of that program. But that was very much the exception, as I understand it.
Yeah, I think you have to be constantly vigilant in regards to it because, some people can speak quite a bit of the language, but when you're talking about being fluent and natural in the language, that's a different story altogether, What we put in place, we not only have the language in the school, but we have also community-based language available for Bama, so that we can continue to do that. Because until it becomes, again, a natural conversation around the table, where it must go, it has to start return back into the responsibility of the families. And it can't just be left to a school or some community program, it runs once or twice a week. It has to really start to develop within the home and around the table and things like that to to get back to that fluency and naturalness of the language. Yeah.
Are you finding a greater use of Kuku in the community as a result of the project?
Oh yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So what's happening? I know I was listening to one of the teachers at the school, or it might have been your teacher from Wujul, talking about what happens when kids are out of school, maybe with their parents somewhere. This language, this conversation, or at least talking together, starts up in Kuku.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The young people, particularly if they see the teachers, they'll sing out in language to them and ask them how they're going and where they're going and all those kinds of things, And that's not just the Bama, not just the Aboriginal kids. The school language program is open to all children, It's great to see, and you hear it in the playground, You get the Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal children sort of singing out to Yalada, how you, and all those kinds of things to each other. And like I mentioned before, they're not only learning a language, but those values and beliefs that are inherent in the language of how you relate, to each other, to the land, to the animals, and all those things around us, from a Bama worldview. Yeah.
So along with the school program, where I heard that the local school has had quite an increase in enrolments, simply because parents wanted to have their kids learn Kuku.
Directly related to having the language within the curriculum, absolutely. And that's still happening. I mean, myself, 3 nieces and a grandson were invited to the school 2 days ago, I think it was, and they had the head government person for the area of the school, and she was mentioning the extraordinary enrolments that are happening within the Mossman State School, and much of it directly related to the language. If you walk through the Mossman School now, you'll see paintings by Bama and of different animals, and they all their sporting teams are named after animals in our language, So they've taken it on in a very sincere way, and they've done it in a good way through involving the elders and community in discussions and listening, and we have a really good relationship with those within the school. When you put it into the context that when my mother was going to the school many years ago in the early 1930s, you couldn't speak your language. It was, absolutely forbidden, And now, to go back and for that language to be central to the health of that school, it's an interesting thing to.
It must be very heartening to watch that happening.
Yes, I think so. I think you have to, you could sit there and say, well, they, years ago they done this and that, but how do you address that in culturally? Well, we implant ourselves there, within the curriculum, and like I said, it's not just the language; it's the worldview and things like that, that is being taught, Yeah, and of course, when now that there's stories being developed and you involve the children in the stories and the drawing of those particular scenes, and and things like that. Well, stories have meaning, and lessons and things like that. So it's good. Yeah.
And as you were saying, there's a parallel program or language class that's run for community at the same time. Can you
Yes.
just tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, yes, and I think it's going back to that. Our language is our responsibility. It's great that you have resources, you have it being presented in schools, and because that's all part of the mix, but they're only all parts of the mix. To keep a language alive and ongoing for the next 100, 200, 300, 1,000 years, you've got to throw everything you can at it. And I say, well, if there's a space there for language, let's fill it up, And just going back from before, that we're getting the adults in the community and maybe some of the youth that aren't getting picked up in the schools and things like that, that come to our language classes. The communities also have an opportunity there to learn and develop their language. We're fortunate we have a fluent speaker for the community language classes, Norman Taylor, who comes down from Woodjaw. He also teaches at the Mossman school, along with I would say the main teacher is Juan Walker, a really an excellent teacher, and has a real way with the younger people, and in how he teaches the language and engages. What you'll find if you walk into a class with Juan is that all the young people are just completely engaged in the learning. Language in the community is, again, another part of the way that we can continue to grow and strengthen the language, not just in those spaces, but more importantly within the family space at home, around the table. You have young people going home and talking language, and their parents saying they better start getting with the program,
Well, we're seeing a lot of that in this sort of digital age, aren't we? Where the kids leading the way.
Oh, yeah.
With the new things that are coming through.
Our Country Story People exhibition occurs in July 2023 during our NAIDOC, because up here our NAIDOC is about a week after everywhere else, really. Part of that is a ceremonial opening where we acknowledge the histories of the Port Douglas Mossman area, and remember our ancestors that were murdered and slain during those early times. Us going back there and doing that is vitally important, to acknowledge those ancestors and to let them know that we're here and we're back. And can I just say, David, that we were invited to the school the other day because it's part of their anniversary, I think 125th anniversary. And back in the 70s, my grandfather, Edgar Davis, was one of the ones that buried the time capsule. They found out about my connection, of course, to my grandfather, and they invited me. They thought it would be a nice touch if we done the welcome at the school. So we accepted that, of course, one, because it honours our grandfather and all the Davis families that still continues to go to the Mossman State School, all the Davis descendants. But we done the welcome in Google, in language, but we also sung a song with a small dance, with my three nieces and my grandson who was on the clapsticks. So that was the first time, but a particular song of welcome was done in that school for we don't know how long. So now it's starting to, what we've been working on and developing, it's not just me, of course, it takes the elders and the younger generation to be involved in, is now starting to seep out publicly, which is I think a healthy thing. But also we're in a period now of developing those songs, recording those songs, but also developing the dances that relate to those songs. So every Sunday now we have a bit of a singing session around home there, and we get those songs and things together, preparing for the exhibition and beyond.
I'm certainly looking forward to it, and looking forward to talking to you some more between now and the opening of the exhibition in July. So till next week. Thank you, John. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, David. Good to be with you, and we'll catch you next week. Jumanadjo.